So when it comes to add a layer of, let's say, creative creative ideas or creative techniques from the animation to the lip sync, and that is going to help us to create that kind of flow or organic feeling. There's a few tips that I recommend you for you to use. These are mainly the ones that I do. I always do like a pass of each of this every time after I've done my first pass of lip sync, where everything is falling into the right place, let's say, and everything is in the right timing. I take my time and I add all these tiny little uh, techniques or tips that helps me to gain that kind of like extra push in the flow or in the feeling of how the character is talking. So for you, I've created this just very quick mouth exercise. I always try to play uh, with the facial rigs a lot. So let's say that all these just a few gestures that I've done here in this kind of like a changes of poses in with using mode shapes that we already talked about. Um, I already apply all these techniques that more or less I'm gonna talk to you about. So the first that I always pay attention is try to always make sure that you have consistent and well done lip rolls. By lip rolls, sometimes depending on the rig, you may have it in the control here in this control here, and it used to be like somewhere in the channel box. For toy, we don't have that because like it's more intuitive for me to have just the possibility of rotating independently these controls, the one that is from the top lip or the say the point of the lip, so I can make sure that I have this rotation outwards and I can play with the lip roll as much as I can. So pay attention to how when you are doing any kind of gesture that you are also adding lip rolls, right? Like for example, in this expression here, this could be perfectly like an O, maybe like a surprise, a small mouth of surprise or something. I'm just bringing both tips of the lips out, and I'm playing with it as the character keeps opening the mouth, right? As actually even pretty close to have like this big open wide mouth, can be maybe like a scared A or ah. I still have some lip rolls. Lip rolls, they always add like a lot of interesting and appealing value. Even here, I still have some of that lip roll going out. In here, I already don't have it. So always pay attention to try to create interesting moments where the lips are sticking out. Um, the other thing that I do play a lot is that I try to create and I try to spend a lot of time, sometimes even with this control here, and I try to do circles. And by circles, I literally mean circles. Like try to make the character do Bobo as he taps, do this kind of circles as he goes, right? We want to get like an interesting feeling as the character talks. So, for example, in this one, if you can see overall from the very beginning, here I'm applying like a. Actually, I could even push it a little more. Actually, maybe I could. What I could do is maybe I could go here a little to the right, a little more to the right. This one I'm using the jaw, but also I could use this guy here. So both of them, they're good for doing that kind of. So I realized that if I talk at the same time I work, I cannot. So basically, as you can see, I'm doing something like that as the mouth goes up and then down. Do you see how it goes? And then it starts to go a little bit more back to here. So that's something that is very interesting for me, and I always try to look for that. And again, you can do the jaw, or you can use this control of the overall control of the mouth shapes for that. The other thing I do a lot is I look at my corners and I try to create interesting arcs and curves in the corners. Just for example, let's follow this one here. You see how is it doing something like that corner? Right. So this is like a general path that I always do, and it's clean actually. It's very interesting how it goes this way. And probably what is happening is that I'm doing kind of like a symmetric movement with both of them, and that adds like a lot of interesting value to let's say appealing movement and organicity to the talking itself. Squash and stretch is important too, but it's one of the techniques that I apply at the very last. I don't really go into squash and stretch. Even in full body, I don't do squash and stretch till everything is more or less in a very good shape and having everything good, because squash and stretch are big alterations, right? So I want to make sure that everything first is working good and see how by adding a squash and a stretch, I'm adding and I'm not breaking things, right? So for squash and stretch, I basically work with this control here. You could either work with this one, which takes the nose too, or with this one. I like the first one here, because by taking the nose, we're adding, let's say for free, a lots of life to the nose in a very subtle way that it creates like a lot of organic feeling. So that's why I tend to prefer to work with this one. So what I'm basically just doing is just classic squash and stretch, right? If I'm coming up, what I'm doing is I'm just scaling this down in this let's say in this axis, and this up more horizontally, right? So I'm just applying basically the principle of a squash and a stretch. So when I go in a big to like a big one, you can see that what I've done is I came thin, created like this thin mouth, and then I brought it a little larger vertically. So again, I do this by passes. It's like, okay, first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna look at the overall shapes, and I do curves with overall shapes. Once that is done and I'm happy with that, then I jump into the corners, and then after I do that, I jump into the squash and stretch. If I have time and if I really feel to. Sometimes some shows, some characters, I don't do all of this. I'm just more or less giving to you which are the main ones that I work with when I do this. Another last detail that maybe you can add if you like is working with the cheeks. Cheeks can be like let's say a complement of adding this kind of squash and stretch feeling, and it all depends of um, again the show, the time that you have, and all that. So for example, when I go up, I can just add some kind of interesting feeling. Maybe I can just scale them a little bit, bring them out. Depending on also the character that you are working with, you can do like a pass of all the cheek. Even these controls here, at some point, I might do a pass where I go and graph, though I know that these are not mouth shapes or let's say part of the mouth, but are affected by how the mouth is moving. If the mouth is coming too high, maybe I want to pay some attention to those kind of moments where the mouth is coming this high. And again, I do this by layers and by stages. It's not that I do everything at one time. I know more or less what kind of techniques or things that I like to consider. So I take my time to do one by one and work in small sections and see how they're working.